Hey, it's Arik from Firearms Nation, and today I give you a training tip that'll help you when you're jerking the trigger. So if that happens to you when you're shooting, something's going on after you pull the trigger. What this means is when you're pulling the trigger, something is causing you to jerk it. Now it could just be a fear of pulling the trigger and having the gun go off. That would not look like what I just showed you. Something like this. That would be all over the place. It means you kind of have good trigger control, but there's still that last little bit that's causing it to push to the side. Now, there's a couple of things that could be doing this, all right? First and foremost, here we are, we're checking our firearm, my SIG P320, good gun. We're checking to make sure the sights are on properly, right? That is probably the first thing you should look at before you start correcting everything is check to make sure that your sights are centered up. And if you haven't had a chance to zero your gun, I would zero it. We can talk about that another time. I generally do a 25-yard zero when it comes to a handgun. So back to the handgun. So what's happening when you're pulling the trigger, you're getting to that little bit of leftover space and you're kind of pushing it each time. That flinch could be a couple of things. One of the things that is most common is a emotional feeling of when you pull that trigger, meaning you get a little bit of anxiety and you just want to break that shot, and so you kind of just slam through it. Or it could also be a different type of anxiety where you're apprehensive about, you know that gun's going to have that little bit of an explosion and that recoil. Your body, though, has tried to put some sort of resistance against it. It pushes as you're pulling the trigger at that very last second. And this is the most common one you'll see when people are always doing this. Even though they have a dry gun, they'll do that. And you're like, everybody laughs at him and it's a big joke and you can have a good time with it. But the reality is that you've developed a trigger jerk over the time. And people, of course, I don't jerk the trigger. Well, yeah, you don't jerk the trigger in what people think of jerking the trigger. You have a different kind of jerk. It's called an anticipatory flinch, meaning over time, the body produces a way to stop that recoil from happening, that loud bang, that big noise. And that push doesn't come before you pull the trigger, it comes after you pull the trigger. That's the biggest distinction. The people who are afraid of shooting push against it before they pull the trigger. The people who have developed good skill and can shoot a good group, it's just to the side, are the people who develop it over years of flinching and not even knowing it. So how do we get past this? Well, here is a surefire tip that you can use on the range, especially if you're shooting steel or something. That's where I see this the most. You get that plate rack set up and you're going through and you're going through and you're going through and you're going through and you just keep missing that plate. You just keep missing it over and over and over again. It's deafening, the silence. Because steel doesn't lie. And then that different kind of anxiety happens. You know, I've been watching some match videos and when people are just on that steel, they're going at it and going at it and going at it. And that's you. You're so emotional about it. You're like, oh my God, people are watching me and I suck. Well, remember, no negative emotion. Check out this video. So here is the tip. This isn't a tactic. This is just a tip to show you what a good trigger pull is like. So what I want you to do is you're going to get on that trigger. All right, I'm going to point it up so you can see. You're going to get on that trigger and you're going to get to that spot where it's no longer easy to pull anymore. So you got that pre-travel or slack as some people call it, and then where you can't pull anymore. I am right on engagement. So all I'm going to do is keep the sights lined up and slowly add pressure. Slowly add pressure. And the gun goes off. All right, take my finger off. I start all over again. If I was on a plate rack, I would take up that slack, keep my sights centered up on the plate, and I'm just adding pressure. I am not trying to make the gun go off, and the gun goes off. And then I would go to the next plate and the next plate. And you'll see that when you do this, the light bulb goes off. All right, I can make steel go down. I can hit steel. I can hit the center of the bullseye. I can do it every time. You gotta teach yourself this now. You gotta keep pulling that trigger properly straight to the rear and get rid of that jerk. Now that you're aware of it, that is the first step into the road to recovery, is awareness. Now that you know that you have that trigger jerk, you gotta start working through it. You could do that with dry practice, pulling that trigger just like I showed you, developing it, getting better at it, doing it faster. Also, gotta do it in live fire, because that's where you're getting that explosion and the loud noise and the gun movement and all that other stuff. So if this has happened to you in the past, I'd like to hear about it. Maybe we can work on fixing it for you. And if this is your first time here, please hit subscribe down below so you're always going to get the new content when I put it out. This is Arik for Firearms Nation. Join the nation.